Welcome everybody. I really hope you had a great 2 days at the one event and still some energy left to be here for 30 minutes and then hopefully join the closing event. Today I'm going to talk about not Gen AI. I think we had enough of those sessions. Well, wait, it's boring. It's SOAP. All right, before I start, so the talk is about how to use SOAP and ODC, how to consume and expose SOAP services. But I do want to give a special thank out to my colleague Ivo Gonzalez, who actually did the initial research on this topic. He's at another event, so I had the honor to do this presentation, make this presentation and do it. So thanks, Ivo. So what are we going to talk about today? I'll first give a small intro on SOAP, for those here that might not know what it is. And then I'll talk about Azure API Management. A little introduction, nothing detailed. I'm not an expert on Azure API. And then I will explain the steps that you need to do to actually consume an external SOAP service in ODC. And after which I will do a similar how-to instruction, but then on how to expose a SOAP service from ODC. Then we do a final recap, and if there's any time left, we can do a Q&A. All right, first things first, what is SOAP? SOAP is an abbreviation for Simple Object Access Protocol. It's a web service standard. It's developed like a long time ago by Microsoft. And even though the acronym is quite simple, the service itself, the way you have to use it, is not simple at all. Here you see an example of a SOAP message, which consists of a few parts. You have the envelope, you have a body, and within the body you have the name of the web service. And then within the body, you have a few parameters if that is what the service requires to execute this function. So you might think, isn't SOAP dead? Because are we not all using REST, GraphQL, webhooks, EDA, data streaming? Is anybody using SOAP? Well, actually, it's not dead. Although the usage is declining over the years, it's still there. And it's mostly found in organizations like government, banking, insurance that are still using these type of integrations because it has a very verbose and advanced capabilities that these organizations sometimes need. If you look at the API report, State of API from Postman 2023, it's still listed as the 4th top most used API style. It's still over 20%. Now, you might say 20% is not a lot, but yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. So yeah, it's still relevant. If we then look what options OutSystems has available in the two platforms, yeah, so OutSystems 11 and ODC, we see quite a difference. In OutSystems 11, you have built-in support to expose and consume SOAP services for like 80% of the use cases. And anything where you get an error in Service Studio, you have the option to use the SOAP Extensibility API and use Service Studio and figure it out for the 20%. So it covers a lot. ODC, that's a different story. There's no built-in support to consume or expose SOAP services. There is, however, an instruction. It's documented by OutSystems on how to consume, but you need to create an external logic. External logic in ODC is what is an extension in O11. So how can we overcome these limitations? Well, as just said, you can use external logic if you want to consume a SOAP service. It does require you to know about C#. So you need to know how to program in C#, have the tooling to do that, but then you're good. But still, there's no solution available to expose a SOAP service. And for that, you could think as an alternative to use a proxy or an intermediary solution like middleware that basically exposes REST responses as SOAP responses or consumes SOAP requests as REST requests. And few popular tools are like MuleSoft, Kong, RPG, AWS, and Azure API Management. So why do I have this talk about SOAP and Azure API Management? Why did I choose for that? Well, this is actually like a real case. And this is why I'm disconnecting with a lot of the Gen AI it's all nice, but then on the day-to-day problems that we face with customers, there are not so many AI challenges, but there are integration challenges. And with ODC, Product League is really betting on ODC, was there from the beginning, and when we have new customers, those are ODC customers. But we also have ODC customers that want to expose a SOAP service. So this year we got a new customer. They have 50 business partners that are using an application built in .NET that we need to re-platform to ODC. These 50 business partners use a SOAP service built in .NET. And when we go live with ODC, what we cannot ask those 50 business partners, hey, use a REST service all at the same time. So that's the challenge. So we need to expose a SOAP service to manage this. And this customer is using Azure for a lot of things already, thereby Azure API Management. If the customer would have used AWS, we will look for another solution. So this is a real case scenario. What is Azure API Management? Azure API Management is a fully managed service from Microsoft with which you can build and manage and secure and also analyze APIs. It has a lot of features. One of its features is that you can restify SOAP services. You can translate between SOAP and REST. And basically you import a SOAP definition, a WSDL or WSDL file, and from there you can configure some settings, you can define policies, and using that you can make the transformation. So how does that look? On the left side you have ODC. On the right side we have the SOAP service that we want to consume in this case. So ODC sends out a REST request. It hasn't SOAP. The only thing I can do is REST. The middleware, the API management, will translate this REST request to SOAP. It will call the SOAP service. The SOAP service will create a response, which goes back to the API management tool, which translates this SOAP request, a SOAP response, into a REST response. So this is basically the flow. And then for producing, it's the other way around. So ODC would have a exposed REST service, but the customer will call a SOAP service. So the client sends out the SOAP request. API management will translate it to a REST request. It will generate a REST response, which in turn again is translated into a SOAP response. Those are the two flows that I want to show today. In API management, you can change the behavior on how all this process works. There is some configuration that you can do, and there are policies. And in these policies, there are a few sections that are relevant. Basically, you define statements that are executed sequentially, either on the request or on the response. And in the inbound section, you apply all the statements that you want to do to apply on the request that you receive, either the SOAP or the REST. Then on the outbound section, that's where you apply the statements for the response. So basically, that's where you do the transformation from REST to SOAP or from SOAP to REST. So let's look at how to consume a SOAP web service. For that, I created a sample SOAP service. Now, I kind of lost my high code skills, so I did it in 011. That's something I still can do a little bit. So I have an entity, a product entity for this demo purpose. I created a SOAP service with a getAllProducts method that just gets all the records from the entity and returns them as a summary, a few attributes. And I have a second method, getProducts by EEN, European article number. Basically, you put in an article number and I get more details for that specific product. So this is my SOAP service for the purpose of the demo. This is the definition, the WSDL or the WSDL file that OutSystems generates, and the URL. So this is the endpoint of the definition. This is the getAllProducts definition, and this is the getProducts by EEN definition. Before we start actually creating the API in API management, when you log in the first time in Azure Portal, you need to create an API management instance. Now, I'm not going to do that today because it takes longer than I have time to present. When I did it, it took almost 40 minutes. So, you only have to do it once. So You don't have to do it every time. So in this case, I already done that, but that is what, when you would start doing this, you need to do. Log in, create a new API management service. You need to have the right permissions, of course. When you have done that, in the menu of this service, there is an option APIs. And when you click on it, you have two options. Either you can create new APIs here, or you can create them from a definition. Now, there are multiple options. The one we are interested in is importing a SOAP definition, which is the one highlighted in the red square. Once you've done that, you select your, in this case, my O11 WSDL definition here. You can also upload a file if you have it locally. Once you've done that, you select the interface from the SOAP service. And then, very important, you need to select the import method. You have two options here, and in this case, we want to convert from SOAP to REST. And this basically takes care of a lot of magic, creating configuration, creating policies, and, well, we'll figure it out. It's not all done automatically, but a lot of the work is done. Once you've done that, you will see in the menu your API. So you see the sample projects API. You also see in the middle panel the two methods, the get all products and the get products by EEN. And we could try consume this REST service right now and see if it all is what we want, what we expect from it. If you do that, you will notice a few things. This is the REST service if you would import it in ODC. And what you see here is that the two method names are no longer there. For some reason, they are replaced with a meaningless name. And although it works, from a maintainability perspective, that's not what you want. So we want to change that and put back the real names there, so we have a better understanding what the API does. Second, the methods are called the HTTP method is post. This is like the default for SOAP messages. And in this case, as we have a REST method and we are getting data, preferable, also the HTTP method is the get. We also want to change this. Then you also see here that on the get all products method, there's an input parameter that we don't need because the get all products doesn't have an input parameter. So we should also remove that one. And on the other method, there is an input method as expected, but its structure is a bit complicated. It should just be a string. It's overcomplicated. And it is sent in the body, whereas on the REST API, I rather have it in the URL as a parameter. So I also want to send it in the request and not in the body. So although this first try actually works if you do it, if you execute it, it's not really the way you expect the REST service to be defined, and you want to change this. So how to fix this? We can make changes in API Management Studio by editing the open API definition. There are some configuration screens where you can just click on drop-downs and change stuff. It's like the easy way. Unfortunately, for reasons I don't know, changing the name of the API method is not possible. It's grayed out. You cannot edit it. I could change here the HTTP method from post to get, but as I have to go and change it somewhere else, I'll do everything in one place. It's easier. So for that, we have the Open API Specification view. If you go there, and this is just a snapshot from it, but you basically get the Swagger definition, the Open API definition for your REST service. And here you see a few of the issues that we want to fix. In the red square, you see the post that we want to change in the get. You see the operation ID with the meaningless number, that meaningless string that we want to replace with a meaningful name. And you also see the parameter definition, the input parameter that we don't need. So I think that's an easy change. We change post to get. We copy paste the correct name of the method there, and we remove a few lines that were the input parameter. And thereby this method is fixed. Same thing for the other method, similar process. We change post to get, we fix the operation ID, On the parameters, we don't want to remove it, but we want to simplify it. So basically, I define an input parameter EEN. It's in the query, it's required, and it's of type string, which is way easier than the structure that was there initially. Then what we need to do is to make sure that on the inbound policy rule, where we get, where we have a get method now, that when we communicate with SOAP again, it must be post. SOAP, the SOAP definition only understands the HTTP post method. So this statement we need to add. It isn't there by default, so the line 8. This is what you need to add to make sure that when it's translated back to SOAP, it actually works. Then the last thing that we need to do is to also apply on the inbound rule of the get product by EEN. We need to get the EEN number from the REST request, from the URL. This is the way to do it. We will get the context request URL. We get the parameter from it. We'll save it in a variable. And then that variable is used in the SOAP body of the SOAP request. Yeah, so here we have the variable name, and here we use the variable name. And this body is the request that is actually sent to the SOAP service that we want to call. And that's basically it, what you need to do to consume a SOAP service in ODC. Now, before we try it out in ODC, you can actually test this already without going to ODC Studio. The Azure API Management portal has a test tab. If you click on it, you actually see at the bottom, just above HTTP request, you see the REST URL. You can click on send, and you get the result. So although I was calling a SOAP service, you get a REST request back in ODC. This is what you want in ODC. The same for the other method, but in this case, you can define the input parameter to test. Here you see the URL where the input parameter is substituted, and when you press send, you get the result back. So now that we have exposed the SOAP as a REST, we can consume it in ODC. One more time to repeat. So what is happening? ODC sends out a REST request. It gets translated to a SOAP request. We get a SOAP response back, which is translated back to a REST request. This is what we have achieved. So let's see how this works. So let's first go to O11. Here I have my SOAP service with the two methods. On both methods, I have a breakpoint. Let's start the debugger. Now I'll go to the portal. I do hope I have internet. Yes, so here's the REST method that I used in my presentation. I'll export the definition. I export this as an open API version 2. I can also use version 3. It doesn't really matter. Both are supported by OutSystems. I'll save it on disk. Now I go to ODC. I have here an empty app. And now I'll start consuming that Swagger definition that I just exported. So here we see the two methods. Let's take them both. And as you see, I have a normal REST service. The get all products with just a response. The get product by EEN with an input parameter and a response. And I can test them here. Yeah, so in this case, I can just go to test. And if I click test, what I expect is to breakpoint to be hit on the SOAP service in O11. And, well, so far so good. Although we are requesting a REST request, where I ended up is in my SOAP REST method. Let's continue here. And voila, here is the REST response that we got. And let me select one of the EEN numbers here for demo purpose. I'll cancel this one. Now I'll go and test the other method. I'll go to the test tab, copy paste the number. And again, if I press test, I expect to hit the breakpoint, but now on the other method. And here we are. And webback in ODC, we see the response of this method. So this concludes the first part on how to consume an external SOAP service in ODC. Let's continue with the presentation. All right, so now we want to do the opposite. We want to expose a REST service, but expose it as a SOAP service. Well, this is a little bit more complicated because when you import the SOAP service definition, not a lot is done by Azure API Management, so you have to do a little bit more yourself. And for the purpose of this demo, I'm not going into all the details. What I will do in November is create also an article and the accompanying resources and sample application with all the details. So that will be available in November. But for this, the purpose of this demo, I will do the highlights. And again, what are we trying to achieve? We want to call a SOAP request that will execute a REST request on ODC, and the REST response we want to have translated back to SOAP. To do that, what I first need to do is actually create that REST service, of course, in ODC. So I have a SOAP service, but I need to create something equivalent in ODC. So this second screenshot is my ODC REST service. It looks very similar. It has the same methods, the same attributes, although if you observe carefully, there's an additional parameter, operation name. Now, this is important. Although in REST, every endpoint is unique. Yeah? You have a unique endpoint for the get all products or for the get product by EEN. In the SOAP service, that's not the case. You have just the web service name and you have methods. And for the API management, to understand which method it needs to map the data, you need to pass that information into it. So for that, I added another input parameter, or output parameter on the methods. And you can set a default value, and in the default value, you just put the method name or anything that identifies what method it is. But in my case, I think using the method name is the most logical value you want to put in here. And we'll see this in the inbound policy, and in the outbound policy, we need this to understand which method we are actually trying to map. Then we go back to create a new API in API management. We basically follow the same steps as in the previous example. So you select the WSDL file, you select the interface, but now it's important to not choose SOAP to REST, but SOAP pass-through. We don't want to have this translation there. Once you've done that, again, you see an API with two methods, and we need to make some changes here. And for that, we go through the policies, but let me first explain what are the changes that we need to make in those policies. For the incoming requests, the policies that we need to do is to query the operation name, that parameter that we defined in the REST service, to understand whether we're doing the get all products or the get by product by EEN. And based on that, we define the mapping. We also send the backend endpoint, which is the REST endpoint, and we need to change the request method to get, because we want to get, it's a get method in the REST. And we need to change the content type, which is XML on the SOAP, but for REST we need to change it to JSON. So how does that look? Here's the inbound policy for both methods. It's basically the same thing. So on line 10, we query the SOAP action from the header in the operation name. On line 11 to 14, the choose, we have a condition that says, well, if we are getting the get all products, in that case, the URL of the REST service is what is mentioned on line 13. And on line 18, we are setting the content type to application JSON. Yeah? Because if we don't do that, it would return a content type XML to ODC. And for the other methods, it's basically the same steps, but with a different endpoint, of course. Yeah? Because based on, in the REST, you have different endpoints per method. Then on the outbound policy, so this is the part where we map the REST response back to a SOAP response. There, based on the operation name, we know what to map. And we need to ensure that what SOAP receives is of content type XML. So this is the get all products outbound policy that you need to set up. Here you make sure that you only do this when you got a request to return all products. And then in the body, you basically do the mapping. So the syntax here is called fluid syntax. It's documented by Microsoft. There is other ways to do this. This is the way we did it. You have other ways to manipulate and do this. But this is an easy syntax. And basically in the body and in the item, you have your REST response that you can substitute here. So it's pretty straightforward. And then at the bottom, we make sure that we have the content type set to XML. For the other method, we follow the same steps, the condition, the body, and the content type. We also need to ensure that we create on the get product by EEN input parameter here. This is how you can do it. And that's basically it. Now we could test also this interface. All right, so let's start doing that. I'll go back to the Azure API Management. I do here have my REST to SOAP sample products API. I do have both methods here. If I click on the method, so let me first go to ODC, by the way. I have here my REST service that I want to expose as a SOAP. So here's my REST with my two methods and the operation name in it. I'll create, again, I put a debugger here. Okay. The internet was faster during the dry run. Right. So I have a breakpoint in the get products by EEN, and I have a breakpoint in the get all products. So in this case, I will just test it using the test tab, but I could also use like a SOAP UI or anything else. So here we see the get all products. We see here the SOAP request that will be sent, the get all products method. And if I press send, what I expect that I'll hit the breakpoint in ODC on the REST service. Although I'm sending a SOAP request, I hit my breakpoint. So proving that calling with a SOAP request, I end up in my REST service. And if I scroll down, I see here the XML based on the REST JSON response. Again, I can select an EEN number for demo purpose. I'll go to the other method. I input the EEN number here. Here's the request. including the EDN. And when I say send, again, I hit the breakpoint, but now in the other method. And when I continue here, I get the XML. So hereby, the proof of when you call a SOAP, you end up in your REST service. Now, how can you use this SOAP service? Well, you can export the WSDL file, the WSDL file here, and then use it in your application, basically. And that's how exposing a SOAP service works. Let's go back to the presentation. Right. So, to recap, what did we learn? SOAP still is used by companies. We got a customer this year, needs it with ODC. The problem is ODC has limited support, only consuming through external logic. But we can fix this with a proxy like Azure API Management or any of the popular API management tools that are available in the market. I think this slide deck and the presentation will be shared by OutSystems. So I also put a page here with some recommended reading. Basically, these were the links that I read through this to understand what I needed to do. But I think they are interesting, especially on the policy expressions. There's a lot that you can do. It's also a lot of reading. This was very simple. I didn't put any security in it. I didn't put any error handling in it. Obviously, in a real case scenario, these are very important non-functional requirements that you need to put in. But for the purpose of this demo, you know, in 30 minutes, that's too much. But please, when you do this real life, you also need to think about security, error handling, rate limiting, whatever. You know, there's a lot of stuff possible, more than I can do and present in 30 minutes.